I was sexually abused by my father from the time I was 11 until I was 16 on nearly a daily basis. He would receive what's called a deferred prosecution agreement, which is essentially a slap on the wrist. I had no rights going through the justice system. Nobody ever asked me what I wanted. One of the benefits of Marsy's Law is that it would balance the scales of justice so that there is an equal playing field. I think Marsy's Law will be a huge step for survivors in their recovery because it empowers them. The message is that what you went through matters, and we are here to help you get through this. You know, one of the iconic symbols of justice in this country is Lady Justice herself, and in one hand she holds a scale. Right now, in Oklahoma, the scale is heavily weighted in favor of perpetrators. I urge every legislator to embrace Marsy's Law because it is the right thing to do.
Well, that was a very strong message. And since October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, are there any events going on this month that you could tell us about?
There are. There's a big rally today at the Capitol, a rally followed by an award ceremony where we're going to recognize those victim advocates among us who are on the front lines every single day trying to help victims of domestic violence. The YWCA has several events planned. Go to the website, check those out. One of the more moving things that they're doing is they're constantly putting up new stories of domestic violence victims, and it's a handwritten note that's posted on their website, and it's fantastic. And so just everything we can do to try and get the word out, to raise the level of public awareness that domestic violence is a problem here as it is everywhere else.
Tell us a little bit about your lapel pin.
Yeah, this month, just like you said, Steve, this month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Purple's what that represents. And like I said, it's just our way. Small things, big things, they all contribute to helping all of us become more aware, more sensitive to those among us that are suffering in silence, as I describe it, those that are domestic violence victims. We think of the direct victims of domestic violence, but there are also ripple effects that impact all aspects of our society, children in particular. So,
let me ask you this. This may sound like a very simple question, but as district attorney, why is Victim Rights Week significant? What's the big deal about that?
You know, just listening.
I don't mean that in light. But
No, I know what you mean. Just listening to the story of the piece that we just heard. As a career prosecutor, I mean, that hits me right in the heart. Sure. Because so much of what the criminal justice system does is helping people who have been the victims of awful, unspeakable things, help them pick up the pieces of that, do the best we can to help them put those together, and then hold accountable those people that have done that to them. And for me personally, Marsy's Law will be an important step forward to do just what she said, to kind of give victims more rights than they have, and to come closer to putting them on an equal playing field. Not that we're going to take away or diminish a defendant's rights, because we all know that cannot happen under our Constitution, but just simply to elevate their rights some, and to recognize that, hey, there's another side to this story. There's another side that the criminal justice system needs to recognize and to respect.
And criminal rights, or crime victims' rights should have always been such a big deal, but what's causing it to get such a big rise right now?
You know, it's been an ongoing movement, and for guys like me that have been around a long time, over 20 years now, as a prosecutor, I've really seen the changes that have made. We went from a system not long ago where victims were completely an afterthought, and now slowly, with more and more advocacy, with more and more people becoming more and more aware of those issues, victims' rights have become elevated. And so recently we've seen really an increased attention to domestic violence, child abuse, and sexual assault. Those are the three probably in the last couple of years that have really probably driven the victims' rights movement the most.
Mike, you opened up, talked a little bit about State Question 794, Marsy's Law. there are some pieces already in place, the law, but this piece of legislation that we will vote on Tuesday, November 6th, is adding some pieces to the Constitution. What are those pieces?
Most prominently, the additions to the Oklahoma Constitution will be crime victims will have a right to privacy, a right to be free from harassment and intimidation, a right to be heard really at all steps along the way in the criminal justice system as their case progresses. Currently, they have a right to be heard at sentencing at the end. This really gives them a right to be heard throughout. It also gives them a right, an absolute right to confer and talk with the prosecutors in the case, gives them a right to hold up their hand and to walk into court and to assert their rights if at any time they feel like their rights are being ignored. Those rights currently don't exist under Oklahoma law.
And just to remind everyone, reason it is the state question is because we're adding this to the Constitution, so it takes the vote of the people to do so.
You keep mentioning domestic violence, but what exactly is domestic violence? Like, what is the definition of it?
Domestic violence is whenever a partner engages in some sort of manipulation, coercion, or control and exercises that over their significant other, spouse, partner, whatever the case may be. That manipulation, control takes many forms. It can be verbal abuse, it can be financial isolation, that's a common one, and then of course it can be physical violence. So all those things together, when that happens in the context of a dating relationship, in the context of a marriage or cohabitation situation, then we consider that domestic violence.
This is kind of a two-part question for you, Mike. Would you remind our viewers the counties that you are representing or that you work in, if you will, if I use that term, and then also elaborate, if you can, on domestic violence. Is it an issue or not an issue in Garfield County?
The 5 counties that I'm honored to serve are Grant County, Garfield, Kingfisher, Blaine, and Canadian. There are times whenever I feel like I'm stretched really thin, honestly. And in those 5 counties, we have 7 offices. Okay, so let's talk locally domestic violence. Domestic violence is a problem in Garfield County, as it is in every county in our state, in every county, every state in the nation. Just to kind of bring that home, every single year since I've been the district attorney, our office in Garfield County alone has reviewed about 500 incidents of domestic violence, about 500. And of those 500, we will end up filing charges in around 200 of those cases. Now, we also know that domestic violence is one of the most underreported crimes there is. So 500, those are the ones that are reported. I'm afraid that that's the tip of the iceberg. So I think the actual number is much higher than that, but those are the ones that actually bubble to the surface and that we actually review. And then, like I said, about 200 of those 500 will end up filing charges.
I hadn't really thought about that, but I guess there is a significant number. Just says, I'm not going to report it, I'm just going to live with it or whatever.
Yeah, lots of different reasons why victims choose not to report it.
Yeah.
So what should these victims do if they are a victim of domestic violence?
One of the things, the first thing that I say that victims should always do is reach out. Doesn't necessarily have to be law enforcement. It can be to a friend, to a coworker, someone at church. Just to reach out, just to say, hey, I need some help. There's some things going on in my family and in my home that are not okay. That's the first step, is to kind of step outside of that isolation, because isolation is such a huge component of domestic abuse. And so that's the first step, is to reach out to someone, and then from there, hopefully then we can get that person plugged into some resources.
It's 7:49, and we have one more question for Mike before we go back to Derek in the news. Mike, last time you were on, we were talking about Sarah, Sexual Assault Response Advocate. Tell us about Sarah, and I think we have a graphic to show that as well. What is Sarah?
Yeah, YWCA here in Enid, very close partner of the district attorney's office here. They do fantastic work in our community. There are other nonprofits that do fantastic work too. The YWCA, they do great work in the area of sexual assault and domestic violence in particular. They have a 24-hour crisis women's shelter there, to where if you don't have any place to go, but you need or you want out of the situation, you can go there, get some help, get a cushion between you and the person that maybe is abusing you. Sarahs, okay, let's talk about Sarahs. The YWCA has a constant need for Sarahs. It's whenever someone reports an incident of sexual assault, the YWCA is notified, and if the victim chooses to, they can be given or assigned a Sarah. And that Sarah is a person that just helps them walk them through the process to help them understand what to expect, what's going to happen next, what their rights are in the area of victims' rights, to let them know, hey, this is what you're entitled to, this is what we can do, what we can't do, those sorts of things. It just is a way for that person to make sure that they're not feeling that they're standing all alone, to have someone to stand with them and to help be their voice when maybe their voice isn't quite strong enough yet.